Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on PaperSave. Joining us today is Holly Condon, the VP of Sales and Marketing at PaperSave, so a huge thank you to her for being here today. A couple of things to go over before we get started. This will be recorded, and I'll be sending that out to all of you. And also, if you have any questions, please type those out in the chat window, and we will read those aloud at the end. So with that, I'll hand things over to you, Holly.
Oh, great. Thanks, Allie. Thanks, everybody, for taking some time out of your Thursday morning to join us. Like Allie said, my name's Holly Condon, and today's webinar, we're going to focus on how PaperSave can help with business continuity by allowing you to manage your processes and documents in the cloud. Allie just did some introductions, so we'll kind of just dive right in. I've been here at White Owl, which is actually a developer of PaperSave, for the past 14 years. It's hard to believe how quickly the time can fly by. I am in charge of the sales and marketing team, and I am very fortunate because I've had most of my team members with me for 9-10 years. And since we're all sitting here probably in quarantine, you know, I always like to tell a little bit about what we're doing to keep busy. And that's, you know, kids and dogs will keep us busy, and trying to organize all of those photos that have stockpiled over the years. So with PaperSave, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this webinar series is because we've been hearing from clients and how much our system has really helped them transition and remain and be allowed to continue with their business operations. So here are just a couple quotes that we received. One is from the Executive Director of Accounting from a Goodwill chapter. And they said they were thankful for making the transition to PaperSave because we can continue our AP functions with everybody working remotely. It is working very well for us. So we're thrilled to hear from them. Also, if any of y'all are familiar with the hamburger Bubba Burgers, we recently heard from their IT director, David, who said that our product, of course, PaperSave, has been the reason we've been able to keep our business continuity intact while moving 100% of our office functions out of the office. So today's demonstration and presentation will go into how does PaperSave really enable you to do that. So whether you're in the office or you're working from home or you're somewhere else, right? We can help with that business continuity because we can give you access to all of that information that may be in filing cabinets right through your browser. We can allow approvers to approve documents from a browser or even a mobile device. And just to focus on that security, because of course that functionality is great, but we got to make sure that it is in a secured environment. We do focus heavily on that security within our PaperSaveCloud. So we do undergo the annual review, the SOC Type 2 audit, as well as we integrate with your Active Directory for your passwords and your authentication to the environment. So some of the key features we're going to cover today is around the OCR engine. And that's great because it's going to read data and pull that data right off of your document. So instead of having to key in vendor, date, dollar amount, invoice number, right? Well, we're going to extract that for you. And we're actually going to use that data to create the transactions inside of your ERP system. So right now, on average, we have over 250,000 invoices flowing through that OCR engine every single month. And we're growing at a rate of about 10% every month as well. We do offer real-time integrations to ERPs. So these are integrations that come right out of the box. So for example, I believe some of you all online use Dynamics GP, some of you are in SL, some are in Business Central. Well, PaperSave has the integration to all of those, so it feels like a natural extension. We can also help simplify audits. So if you need to do a query and pull supporting documents, you can do that. So for example, for those of y'all who are using GP, we integrate right with the Smart List query to be able to pull groups of documents very easily and very quickly. So once again, our integrations that we have available, and we also want to focus on the cloud. So we are going to take a look at the cloud version of PaperSave today. It is in its 6th year, so we are not new to the cloud. We have been there for 6+ years, and we have over 6,000 subscribers to that environment. And what's nice is, so some of y'all may be in the cloud, some of y'all may not be in the cloud, but it does integrate with both on-prem versions of your applications as well as other cloud environments. So if you have Business Central in the cloud, or you have GP or SL in the cloud somewhere else, right, we can integrate there as well. So PaperSave has done a lot with G2 Crowd. So some of y'all may be familiar with G2 Crowd, but it's a review site. And what makes G2 Crowd unique is that these are actually verified reviews. So nothing gets published for any application that you can review on G2 Crowd without the user verifying that they use that product. So I can't tell everybody on my staff, hey, go give me a review so it boosts our ratings. I can't do that because they know that we are employees of White Owl. So what I'm trying to say here is our clients have gone online, they have given us reviews, and we have received 4.4 out of 5 stars within G2 Crowd. So we're very highly rated application out there. And just the spring awards came out, and we have been, based on all the data that's collected, we have earned the easiest admin for the application and best meets AP requirements as well. So that is compiled based on all the data from all the different applications that play within the same space that PaperSave does. And those are 2 great awards that we are top in our class with. Now, once we get into the application and we start thinking about deployments, we do have a couple different deployment options, one of which is called our Swift deployments. And these have been very popular over the past 2 years because it takes years of best practices built into these pre-configured workflows, and there are a couple different options so that we can have you up and running in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And that really cuts down on, the time, internal time spent during a implementation, and really allowing you to start earning, if you will, that money back because of the cost savings with PaperSave. So what I'm going to do is flip over into the other monitor, and I am going to now see the PaperSave screen. So do you all, and Allie, you can just make sure that I'm sharing that right monitor where you see PaperSave?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So here we are at the start page of PaperSave, and this is our web client. So it's neat right here when you go into your PaperSave application, you can see, what do you want to do? Do you want to add a document? Do you want to review a document? You can see some alerts from our development team or support team about what's going on with the application, when there might be maintenance coming up, things, new features that are being released. Like here, just the other day, we enabled our learning platform. So throughout the application, you'll see these quick walkthroughs, and the system basically has a built-in integrated learning platform right with it. Now, here we can navigate around PaperSave. So if we want to actually add documents into the workflow, we can go right to acquire. And here in this acquire screen, we can say, okay, well, what is it we want to acquire? If we want to acquire a workflow document, right, I can just say, hey, I want to add documents into the workflow. Here are those workflows that we've configured in this sample environment. So I can select one of those workflows and I can get to this capture screen. Now, PaperSave has many different ways of capturing documents. We see 3 of them here, but we also can monitor an email account or email accounts. So that way, if you get your documents electronically today, maybe some of y'all are printing them out, well, we don't need to do that because PaperSave can monitor that email account and bring those documents right into the system. So whether you're using a web-based scanner or you're using a scanner that's Twain compliant, or we want to upload files or drag and drop files, we can do all of that through this screen. So for today's interest, I'm just going to grab some documents and bring them in. Now we can group documents in a batch. This isn't a batch within the ERP system. This is just kind of saying, hey, these are the documents I just scanned. So we can give it a batch name. We can auto generate. If we don't want to deal with that, we can say, don't ask me again in the future. Now, what the system's doing is it's bringing in those documents, and you'll notice there it says waiting for OCR. Okay, so what the OCR engine is designed to do is it's designed to read the document and extract the data over here to the PaperSave profile fields. Now, as I scroll through these documents, you'll notice that they're very different in their format, okay? And that's okay, because what PaperSave will do is it will identify information from one vendor's format to another. So for example, invoice number, invoice date. Here if I go to the next one, you'll notice this one has, whoops, let me go back. Okay, this one has, oh, that was the one we just went back to. So here on this one, we have invoice #, right, date. So depending on, these identifiers that really are very consistent from one vendor's invoice format to another, PaperSave will read that information and it will extract that data over here to the profile fields. Okay, now one of the things we've recently added to the system is a accuracy read. Okay, so for example, you can see that this document is probably not the best quality document, but you can see here the reads are pretty high. So invoice number is 100%, invoice amount is 90%. You'll notice vendors lower, and there's a reason for that, and that's because it's not just reading, the vendor name off of the document, it's also validating that vendor name right against the ERP. So it's actually reading against those tables to say, hey, when you create the transaction, this is the vendor ID that is going to be created for. Okay. So that way, because we're doing that lookup, so we're not just reading information, but we're also looking it up and comparing it. That's why that number is going to be a little bit lower. Now, there are lots of things that are going on during this capture. So once we understand what vendor it's for, we then can pull defaults in from the vendor record to populate that distribution, right? So if I want to go in and add another row in here, I can add and I can look up. So, maybe I wanted to look up my supplies account. Well, this is doing a real-time lookup right on your chart of accounts to be able to identify that information. Okay, so I can type it in, I can look it up. If I want to, modify that amount, I can do that. I can add rows, I can delete rows, whatever the case might be right through here. Okay, now here under description or PO number, there's no PO number referenced. There's description we can actually pull over. And so what I can do in that case is maybe I just want to capture this value here, right? I didn't have to type it out. I could just point and click and capture that information. So if data isn't extracted off of the document from that capture, you can actually point and click and train the system on where to find that information. And then what we can do is learn that document so that next time it sees this invoice format, it knows where those values should be pulled from. Okay, so that's a little bit about OCR. Now from here, we can select approvers, or approvers can be defaulted. So if, anytime Butler Buckley Dietz needs to go to Tammy, any invoice needs to go directly to Tammy for her review, we can pull that information in right from the vendor record as well. Or if we wanted to look up and add reviewers, we could do that as well. Okay, and then we can submit that item and boom, goes into the workflow. So now Tammy gets an email alert that lets her know that there's a document out there that needs her review. Okay, so when we think about capture, the nice thing with a document management system is we're going to capture the documents very early in the process. We can automate that capture by monitoring those email addresses, so you have complete visibility to that document in your process, without really even touching it, right? Those documents are still coming in paper. We can scan and capture, or we can upload documents as well. Okay, so let's take a look at PaperSave. Then now keep in mind, I'm doing this right through a web browser. So if I go into, let me pop open this area in my system, and let's go into this email. And here within email, you'll notice I have an alert. And this is a system generated alert that lets the approver know for this workflow, for this step, we've got 9 items out there that I need to review. Okay, now I can review from my mobile device, right? Doesn't matter if it's an iPhone or an Android. I can review it there. I can also review it right from my browser. Now down here in this grid though, you'll notice you've got some insight as to, okay, well, what exactly is out there, so we can see vendor information, dates, dollar amounts, and so forth. So when I click that link, PaperSave authenticates me as a approver, and it takes me into that workflow so that I can review those documents. So that way it doesn't have to authenticate me and I'm sorry, I already had that open, so it was trying to get the other tab back. But here it does, takes me right in there so I can review those documents. So I can start with this first one, and if all of this looks good, I can approve it. Right now, that's going to add information onto that workflow audit trail that says, hey, I approved it out of this step in the process. And then you can see how it brings up that next document. Well, if I want to skip over that one and go to the next one, I could do that. And here I can look at this document, I can approve it, I can reject it, and it sends it on to that next approver. So your approval process can be structured so that there can be different tiers of approvers, just as an example. So if I can approve up to $1,000, and here this invoice is $1,425, right? When I approve it, it escalates it to the next level of a reviewer. It doesn't ask me, well, where do I want to send it, right? It knows that by the workflow configuration within the system that's based on your workflow process. Now, while we're looking at this viewer, I just want to point out a couple things. One is, if I want to save or print or download or email this document, right, I can do all of that from these toolbar options, right? This is a 2-page document, so this is how we can flip between pages of that document. If I want to annotate the document, so I want to type text, right on the document, I can, type text on the document, right? So that way we can circle, we can highlight. We even can use these rectangles to hide information on a document as well. So if you do have information that is sensitive and you want it hidden, you do have different levels of security around those annotations. Okay. Now, eventually documents will travel to a step in the process, and that step where we integrate in with GP, we have called AP review, right? So any document that's been captured, it's been gone through all the different levels of review, it then ends up in a step where it comes back to AP. Instead of AP needing to key the transaction into the ERP system, right? This is what my role is going to turn into. I can look at this information again, make sure the distribution looks good. If I want to see any of the history of where that document's come from, who all's approved it, reviewed it, moved it, I can do all of that. And then you'll notice here, submit. So that submit is going to take that data and push it in through the integration tools available with those different applications that I mentioned. So if you use SL, we use a web services tool. If you use Business Central, we use the native APIs within Business Central. If you use GP, we use eConnect, right? Because each one of those applications has different architecture and structure and integration options. But by that submit button is going to take that data and push it in to create the transaction. And then it brings up that next document, right? So here, submit, boom, it gets pushed in and that transaction gets created. Now, before we go over to that transaction, I want to talk a little bit more about the information you have available at your fingertips, okay? So going back here to, well, actually, let me do this. Let me close down here and let's look at this workflow. So if I want to look at everything out there across all of these different steps, I can do that. And I'm just going to clear that filter. So now we can see some analytics coming up. So I know what's out there. I know the largest invoice amount, the oldest invoice date. Wow, January 1st, 1900. That's kind of old. But here, if I want to filter on information, I can do that as well. Because you'll notice here in this big list, I can filter. So if I wanted to look at something like invoice date, I'm trying to get the invoices that are out there just from last month. Maybe I want to put that filter in there is equal to, or let's say is before, so less than, let's put for last month, 03/31/2020. Okay, so now you can see how it narrows those results down, right? So down here in the lower right, you can now see I've got 49 items out there. If I want to export this to Excel, right, we have that capability. So if I'm doing accruals, the end of the month or the end of the quarter, all of that data can be taken right out to Excel. And down here in my lower left, right, it will pop open Excel for me. Now, the nice thing is here on this Excel file, right, you have all of the columns of information, including all of that GL distribution and so forth. But you'll also notice back here, you have a hyperlink, and you can use either hyperlink, but that takes you right back into that supporting document. So right here from Excel, I can even get to document. So you'll see this Excel integration throughout the screen anytime we're looking at one of those grids or those, as we refer to it, as lists within the application. Okay. You also can choose what fields you want to see on these screens, right? So here, if I want to not look at, that batch or file name or owner or step, I can remove those values so I don't see all of that information that may not be important to me. And it's just removing it from my view, okay? Not anybody else's, just mine. Also, up here in the gear, we have some other great features. And so some of those other great features is like out of office. So if I'm going to be out of the office, and let's say I'm not going to come back until May 4th, then I can select a reviewer or think of it as a delegate in my absence, right? So Sarah is going to get my documents that I need to approve during that period of time. Okay, so you can set those those delegates up as needed. Okay, so let's take a look now, and let's hop over into Dynamics GP. Okay, so I'm just going to minimize the Outlook, and I'll I think most of you all use GP. I know there are some others, but this will kind of give you a feel of how we integrate with an application. So just as an example, when I hit submit, it created the transaction. So it would create the voucher in SL, the purchase invoice in Business Central. And if I go into the batch that we pushed it into, because this is GP, and I scroll down to that batch number, let me grab that and scroll down. I have a batch being created for today's date. And you can see I probably should do a little bit of posting out there. So today is the 23rd. Okay, so here's the batch, 042320, right? And here's the transaction that we created. And then here is that document, right? So if I go to show documents, that's now going to pull the document from PaperSave into the window for me, right? So we were in GP, whether GP's on-prem or in the cloud, and it just communicated with PaperSaveCloud to bring that document up in that browser for me. Okay, so that's how we can get back to documents. So anytime you need to search and retrieve a document, you're going to navigate through the ERP system that you use, right? So here, if I want to open up a record, and there are different shortcuts there within the applications that allow you to then show those documents. Now, in the case where a document then gets processed for payment or is PO related, right? PaperSave has a concept called interrelated documents. And what we mean by interrelated documents is we extend the relationships that exist in the ERP applications down to the document level. So for example, you have a purchase order, then you might have a receiver, right? Then you have an invoice, then you have a check. So all of those transactions have interrelationships, or it could be just we have an AP transaction or a voucher and we have a payment. Well, here on our screen, if I want to look at that extended group of relationships, I can do that by coming to one of these options. This is a brand new user interface. Well, it was one of those options. Let me show you another way that you can get to it. If I go back here to GP and I go to show interrelated documents, that's another shortcut. But here we can see all of those interrelated documents. So I can see vendor documents, I can see a payment, I can also see that payables transaction, right? So if I wanted to open up all of them, or maybe I wanted to open up certain ones, right, I can do that and then just hit show grouping. So we can get to the information that we want to, and we can also scroll through those documents as well. So here's the image of the check, right? Here's the image of the contract or the W-9 form or whatever other documents that you have that you are giving somebody rights to view through this interrelationships. Okay, so that's just an example of that drill down from the record to the document. Now, some ERP systems have what they refer to as query tools. And so when you query something in the system, you can then get back to all of the supporting documents. So here, just as an example in GP, this allows you to look at those payables transactions. So maybe I'm preparing for an audit and I want to pull a group of documents that meet certain criteria, maybe by GL distribution, maybe by date, maybe with dollar amount reference, I can create a smart list around that. Now with PaperSave, if I want to pull all of those supporting documents, I can show documents from a query, right? And that now takes me from the ERP system with that query functionality into PaperSave, right? So we're looking right back at one of those lists. So just as an example, we just pulled 685 documents that are tied to that query within really just a few seconds. Here you can identify what record the document's relating to. Here you can see the voucher information, the date, the dollar amount if I scroll over, the vendor information, and so forth, right? If we want to export to Excel and give this information to our auditor, we can give our auditor temporary rights into PaperSave so that they can drill down and click those links. So just as an example, if I export that to Excel and I then look at, that file, right? I can share it with them so I could email it to them. And here's that hyperlink back to every single document, right? So if you want to remove some of these columns of information, you could do it here in Excel. You could also do it on that previous screen before you exported it. But that way, you don't have to go through GP to get to a document. You can use it through Excel. You can use it through different reporting tools that you might use. And then we also have another method that we'll get to in just a moment. Okay. Now, also within this list, right, you can do groupings, you can filter. So at this point, you said, hey, I want to only look at invoices that are greater than or equal to, let's say, $10,000, right? Now it's just going to filter through that list for you with those matches, okay? So you can get back to documents different ways from that smart list, okay? Now let's take a look at another functionality of PaperSave, and that is PaperSave Search. Okay, so we've seen this list many times, right? We saw the list in the workflow, we saw the list with the smart list integration, but here I can do some searching right inside of PaperSave. So it's not dependent on any ERP application search feature like that smart list / query search was. So here, if I said, hey, I want to look at all my W-9 forms, I could just type in W-9, and here it's doing a simple search, right? Because what we're doing is we are searching on information that is document driven. So for example, here, when we captured this W-9 form into the system, we said, hey, it's a W-9 form. So when we did that search, it pulled up all of those W-9 forms for me, okay? So that's a really nice feature. So it allows you to search across all of those records based on information inside of PaperSave, inside of these user-defined profile fields. So we have about 10 different ways that we can get documents into the system. So, we can drag and drop, we can scan and so forth. But, that way when you put it in, you can categorize it, and that way you can search on it. Now, you also can search on documents for content. So back here in this gear, I have my content search enabled. Okay, so that means if I'm looking for a document, and I don't know who the vendor was, or I don't know what batch, GL batch it may be related to, right? Or what GL account number it was coded to. And I'm searching on a value, right? I could type that value in, and it will take me then into the documents that have wall mount somewhere within the body of the document, okay? So now we just pulled 8 items out of the system. Okay, so now when I drill down into that document, it says wall mount. Okay, and it's highlighted for me because that's what we searched on. Now you'll also notice this little area up here, and it's saying, hey, you know, this is what you searched on. But if I want to do a secondary search there, and I said, oh, I want it to look for sink, right? Well, here I have some options. I can match the case, whole words only, restrict to the current page. So if this is like a really long invoice, right, we can restrict it to different things. And as I search, right now you can see that it appears 3 times, and my highlight has jumped me over to those values on the screen. Okay, so we can get back to information a wide variety of ways within inside of PaperSave. Document classification, we can drill down from the ERP record, we can use the ERP search, we can use content search, but we also have another way of being able to search on documents as well. So that is an example of our simple search. So very simple, right? It's kind of like Google. We plug something in there and it brings up those results. Now with the advanced search, this is more where we might want to build a query within inside of PaperSave, right? So if I want to build a query and I want to use you know, HR information or fixed asset information, right? Or GL information, I can do that, right? Because you have all of those different options. PaperSave is integrated in with over 65 different cards and transactions. So it's not just for AP, but that tends to be, you know, one of primary business issues people are looking to address. But here, just as an example, we can build some filters, right? So we add some conditions. So if I said, oh, I want to look at any invoice number or invoice date, I want to pull a list of invoices between a certain date, right? So here, if I said date is greater than or equal to, right? Maybe I want to say 1/1/2020, and let's throw another condition in there, and date, whoops, I keep flipping too fast through there, date is less than or equal to, and we'll just leave it as today's date. Now, as we put this, build this query with the different criteria, you'll notice here that PaperSave is showing you that query that's being built, okay? Now, these searches can also be saved. So if I want to pull up an existing one that I've already built, right, I can do that. Now, what's nice is maybe my dates have changed today versus, you know, last time I ran this. We do have the capability of coming in and changing that search criteria, right? So if I came here and said, oh, I only want it less than or equal to, you know, a certain date, you know, I could put in, you know, whatever that date is, or maybe I want to change those dollar amounts. So I want 5,000 to 15,000, right? And then I can hit search, right? So you can build these criteria, save them, and then you can always, you know, pull them up and change those values around as well. Now, because we are here once again back in the in that list, right? You could do further filtering through here. You can export to Excel. You can choose the fields of what you want to look at, so it's going to remember those favorites for you and so forth. So if I wanted to open up a group, you could start with one and just simply scroll between those records. So as you do that, right, as you're looking at one document, you know exactly what record that document's related to, because that is all GP information that we are pulling, or I should say ERP information, because you know, it could be pulling from the SL voucher or the Business Central purchase invoice and so forth. Okay. Okay, so let's look at one last feature. And that last feature is this browse. Okay, so if I'm not a GP user, I'm not an SL user, a Business Central user, and you want me to have access to documents, you can give me rights into the different document types. So if I came here and I said, hey, I want to look at and do a search, right? Maybe I'm looking for an invoice that was processed for Fujitsu last month, okay? Here, you'll notice it's going to come up with some values for me. And if I want to filter on those values, so if I said I want it to search on a certain vendor name, I can say starts with North, and it's just going to pull the one up because that's all I have out here that I have rights to. And then I can go into that document. Okay, so that way we can allow people to be self-servicing. So they don't have to come to somebody in finance, for somebody in finance to pull that document out of the filing cabinet. You can allow them to pull that information themselves. Okay, so I know we covered a lot of information in a pretty brief period of time. I know if any of y'all have questions, or if you haven't put them into that chat or that Q&A section within the GoToWebinar, why don't you do that? And I'm going to ask Allie to come back online and help with reading those questions to me, and then I can answer some of them for you.
Awesome, Holly. Well, first of all, thank you for that awesome presentation. We do have one question already. Can project information be captured into SL?
Excellent question. Yes, absolutely. Project information can be captured into SL. With the different ERP systems, sometimes the chart of accounts are structured differently. So you might have an account code, natural account, and then the GL codes, and then project information or analytical accounting information. Or in the case of Business Central, you also have dimensions. So all of that information can absolutely be captured in that GL distribution. So, it's not just to an account number, but it can be all the different values that your system is configured to track, right? And those can also be required. So, you can't do put in a transaction without defining that project, as an example. Yep, great question. And we can show you also an example of the what that looks like specifically with the SL integration. Unfortunately, I tried to kind of keep things as general as I could, but we'd be happy to do that for you as well to give you that idea.
Thank you, Holly. We have another question. Can you please re-review really quickly on how to link an approver for a specific vendor?
Yeah, so one of the ways that you can do that, and my example was like Butler and Dietz, right? If it always goes to Tammy, if you define that on the vendor record, right, just like we brought in the vendor defaults, the GL distribution, we can also bring in that approver information as well. So anytime we can leverage what you define within the ERP system to help make the AP process as touchless as possible, we love to do. So if that approver needs to be updated, you update it in the vendor record, and then PaperSave just constantly pulls all of the information from that one source. So there's not intermediary tables that are needed to sync with and pull from and so forth.
Awesome, thanks. We don't have any more questions.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me do this. Let me pull up the slide again, and let me bring in some information for you. So, whoops, there we go. So if you all have any questions or you'd like any additional information, Christopher Tepper at TM Group would be more than happy to help you. We've worked closely with TM Group over many years. So, as Christopher needs to reach out to schedule an SL presentation or a Business Central presentation, or provide, maybe go into different scenarios in greater depth, we'd be more than happy to do that. But any questions or information that you need, please feel free to reach out to Christopher. Also, I think we are going to be sending out the slide deck for today's presentation to everybody as well. So that will come out to you shortly. But thank you for your time today. Allie and I and everybody else at the PaperSave team and the TM group team really appreciate your time, and hopefully everybody stays well during this pandemic, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Holly. Have a good one, everybody.